So
Now,
he's going to, you're expecting him to say that the pills, whichever one of the pills we're talking about this time, would be in Mrs. Ward's stomach only for 15 to 20 minutes, and therefore the pink liquid that was in the stomach would not be from the pills?
I'm not saying that at all.
Okay.
What I'm saying is if she did ingest pills, they would only be there for 15 or 20 minutes when there's no food. And so, not to give away everything, but I guess I'm giving away everything, you know, the interplay and tie-in between how long, how many hours it takes from ingestion of this medicine to get to the peak serum level in the blood. And regardless, I am going to ask anybody that they put on the witness stand about the citalopram, which I would expect to be Dr. Valentine, their toxicologist that testified before, and Dr. Anderson, if he delves into this new world of citalopram for him again. I would certainly ask them that same question and on that same topic based on my good faith basis to ask those questions. So my position would be, I understand, you know, that I just learned this,
That was going to be my question. Did you just learn that this morning?
Yes, ma'am.
And how long after you learned it did you relay it to the defense?
Sometime between 8:30 and 9, after learning it sometime between, when did I get here? 7:30 and 8.
Okay.
So I understand, hey, look, you know, if we didn't have a toxicologist coming, that would be an issue. But I expect they do, and I don't know that this should be a really complex matter for Dr. Valentine to have an opinion about one way or another. I mean, whether I can ask Dr. Goldberg or not, anybody they put on that wants to talk about stomach contents is going to get asked about that.
All right, Mr. Ellsberg, State learned the information this morning. They gave you the information within a reasonable time of having learned it. I can certainly give you time to depose Dr. Goldberg on this issue. Your witnesses won't be testifying until next week, correct?
That's correct, Your Honor.
So why would that not solve? This appears to be an inadvertent discovery violation in that the state didn't deliberately withhold information. The opening of the defense caused an additional conversation which brought up the additional information. Tell me why, following that procedure of ordering Dr. Goldberg to be deposed on this issue prior to him testifying, and then you can relay the information to your witnesses, and that gives your experts several days to address what does not seem to be a huge issue.
Respectfully disagree with the court on several points. First, I think it is a huge issue. Second, it was
Why? Take it one at a time. Tell me why it's a huge issue, and once again,
It was a
your
huge
mic,
issue.
I'm having trouble hearing you. You've got to wear that mic. Thanks.
It was a huge issue. It is a huge issue in this case, and it was a huge issue in the last case. Because what you have is an 840 level of citalopram in Mrs. Ward. And what the state is telling you, is telling this jury, ignore it. That number is meaningless. That our position, our defense in this case, as the court is aware, is that Mrs. Ward acted out, acted on the edge, snapped, because she was taking excessive medication in the form of citalopram.
I understand what your defense is, and I understand what the significance the defense is arguing is of the level of the drug. That's not the question I'm asking you. All right? I'm looking at Dr. Goldberg's trial testimony. Clearly, I don't have his deposition. Do you have his
I
deposition?
do, Your Honor. It's in the...
From last time?
I do.
Okay.
We have the depositions, right? I have it. I don't know if it's in court with me today. It's either in court or in my hotel room.
All I have is the trial transcript.
I believe I can get it emailed.
Which I've read before.
Okay.
All right? And I'm going back through it again as we're talking.
So if
His testimony minimized the significance of remind me which one we're talking,
the stomach contents with regard to the issue of citalopram.
The citalopram concentration in her postmortem blood, he's minimizing this in his testimony, in
And
the
w-
sense that he said he didn't feel it was significant, it wasn't a contributing factor to her death. I mean, he didn't feel it was very important. All he's saying now is that the pills would have been in her stomach for 15 to 20 minutes. What I'm asking you about, all I'm asking you about is his new statement, let's assume it's a new statement, that the pills would be in the stomach for 15 to 20 minutes. I don't know of any expert who would need more than maybe a day to pull together whatever testimony. They may or may not contradict this and say, oh no, based on such and such, the pills would have been in her stomach for an hour and a half, or whatever they're going to say. That's all that's at issue here. The remainder of his testimony isn't changing. That's what I'm asking you about, not about the significance of the drug and the stomach contents. Go ahead.
Okay, so what essentially, cutting through that, what Dr. Goldberger is going to tell this jury is that the fact that the stomach contents weren't tested doesn't matter,
Right?
okay? So
That's what he said the first go-around.
and he did not. He did not say it the first go-around.
Keep going. I'll
Okay.
keep reading while you're talking.
Yep. And he said and he's coming up with a different and new reason for minimizing the stomach content. Now, the fact that the state learned about it last night, to me, that doesn't
He
seem...
learned about it this morning, is what he just testified to.
Okay, the fact that the state learned about it this morning when they've had the ability to contact their experts for months. The fact that they waited till this morning, and this wasn't a new issue that was brought up and closed. This was a central issue, may not have been the central issue of the last case, but it was a central issue of the last case.
I'm listening.
That's my argument, Judge. And I'll just add, Judge, that as Mr. J has noted, we did have an agreement.
Oh, I know you did. I did say it was a violation of discovery because of the agreement. But what I'm finding is for Richardson purposes, it's an inadvertent violation. It's not something they deliberately withheld. They got the information this morning based on the opening statement made by the defense yesterday. And I'm going to give you a moment to point out to me where in Dr. Goldberg's testimony from the first trial, how long, or the contents of the stomach was a central portion of his testimony.
No, Your Honor, I may have misspoken. I said that the issue was a central issue of the trial.
Okay, well, we're only talking about Dr. Goldberg. So Dr. Goldberg, what I'm understanding is the new testimony he's going to give is that these pills would have been in her stomach for 10 to 15 minutes, or 15 to 20 minutes. Sorry. That, at this point in time, does not appear to be an issue that is so complex that it can't be resolved with a deposition of Dr. Goldberg, which I am ordering the state to provide Dr. Goldberg to the defense prior to his testimony. Then you can advise your experts today that you expect this to be the testimony of Dr. Goldberg. Once you've completed his deposition on this issue, then we'll discuss how much time your experts say they need to deal with this testimony and why they're requiring that much time, if that time is, 2 or 3 weeks or anything beyond 1 day. All right?
Thank you, Judge.
All right. Thanks.
May I put one more thing on the record to provide additional context?
Yes, sir.
Page 1777 of the trial transcripts.
Is that Dr. Goldberg's testimony?
Dr. Stephanie. So this is a matter of the defense being on notice of this issue.
Let me just get to Dr. Stephanie, but go ahead. Which page was it? 17?
1777.
Okay, go ahead.
My notes of his testimony from that page is that he did examine the victim's stomach contents, liquid pink color, no evidence of recent ingestion of pills. You'd see pill fragments.
Your Honor, may I supplement that?
I'm sorry?
May I supplement that?
If y'all would give me a minute to get to that page.
Apologize.
a lot of pages. Okay, go ahead.
I'll reference page 1778 of the transcript where Dr. Stefani was asked, how long a time frame after a person ingests pills would you still see pill residue? Answer, there's many factors. It would depend on how many pills the decedent took, if they ate at the same time, so I can't give an exact time frame of how long those pills would last in the stomach. And now we're having an expert coming in who is going to give an opinion on the exact time the pills last in the stomach.
I understand. I think what Mr. J is saying is that the discussion of how long the pills were in the stomach did occur during the first trial. In any case, folks, take the depo. Let me know. What time were you expecting Dr. Goldberg to testify, morning or afternoon?
The morning?
And is he coming in tonight?
No.
What time is he supposed to get here?
Well, it's in flux on how far we get today. He would prefer not to be here super early, but obviously in order to be deposed, he would be, because he's coming from Gainesville, which is a 2-hour drive for those that don't know.
Hopefully you can get his deposition. You can start at 8, be ready around 9. Why don't you, throughout the day, communicate with Dr. Goldberg, give me a time frame so that I can keep the jury apprised, because I don't want the jury sitting around and waiting. I would prefer that Dr. Goldberg be deposed before we start the day's proceedings, so that any other evidentiary issues that may arise, and to give the defense time that they feel, based on their conversation with their experts, that they need to reformulate their cross-examination of Dr. Goldberg. So,
Your Honor, here's what I would ask. I would ask that, my understanding is the state is planning on putting on witnesses on Monday morning. That's what Mr. J had advised us yesterday. To give us appropriate time to get the information to our experts and to consult with our experts, we would ask that perhaps Dr. Goldberg testimony be delayed until Monday so we could take the deposition, get the court's rulings, and then over the weekend work with our experts, because tomorrow's Friday.
you want to call him on Monday?
Without going through the literally hundreds of emails about people's witnesses' availability and the chess game that I have to play, I don't know what his availability is on Monday, but that is something we can explore.
All right, you all work together on this, nothing else. I've ordered his deposition. Again, this does not appear to be, at this moment, an overly complicated statement he's going to make that your experts couldn't address pretty quickly. However, that may change based on what happens at the depot and what you tell me your experts are saying. So we'll stay the course. Have we got the jury? You guys ready? Anything else?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
All right, let's bring the jury in. State recognized presence of the jury.
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
Have a seat, everyone. Good morning. How are you all doing this morning? Sorry for the slight delay in bringing you into the courtroom. We just had some legal matters to discuss. It's our morning conversation. Did anyone see, hear, or read anything about this case last night? Did anyone attempt to speak to you about the case between the time you left the courtroom and this morning? All right. State, you may call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The state will call Brian Cross.
You may inquire.
All right, good morning.
Morning.
All right, can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Brian Cross.
All right, can you spell your first and last name for the court reporter?
BrianCross.
All right, now, Mr. Cross, where are you employed?
With the Orange County Sheriff's Office.
And how long have you been employed with the Orange County Sheriff's Office?
About 19 and a half years.
All right. Can we hear you a little better now, I think?
Hopefully.
Okay. Now, back in 2009, what unit in particular were you assigned to with the Orange County Sheriff's Office?
I was assigned to the homicide unit.
And in the homicide unit, were you the lead detective in this case?
Yes, I was.
And do you work alone, or do you have other members of the Orange County Sheriff's Office assist you in your case?
We work in generally teams of 4.
Now, at a certain point during the early investigation, did you have the opportunity to meet James Ward?
Yes, I did.
All right, and do you see him here in the courtroom today?
Yes, I do.
All right, you please describe him.
It was a gentleman that was just standing up with glasses and a blue jacket, red tie.
Thank you. And let the record reflect that the witnesses identified the defendant. Now, while you were meeting Mr. Ward, did you provide him with his BlackBerry cell phone?
Yes, I did.
Now, I'm going to approach what's already been introduced evidence of States 13. Can you take a look at States 13? You can open it up. Do you recognize States 13?
Yes.
And is this Mr. Ward's cell phone, the BlackBerry that you provided to him?
Yes.
Now, as part of your investigation, did you travel to the medical examiner's office in Miami-Dade County?
Yes, I did.
All right, and can you tell the jury why you went to the medical examiner's office in Miami-Dade?
I went to the medical examiner's office to bring the forensic photographer the firearm that was used in this case. And there was going to be high-resolution, high-speed photographs taken of the weapon as it was being fired.
Now, that sort of testing and that sort of lab work, is that available up here to the Orange County Sheriff's Office?
No, it's not.
Now, I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification as State's Exhibit P. You can go ahead and open it up. Do you recognize State's P?
Yes, I do.
Can you tell the jury how you recognize State's P?
That was the firearm that was collected from the scene and that I brought to the photographer in Miami.
And that revolver took a field trip with you to Miami?
Yes.
All right, is that the .357 revolver?
Yes.
One moment. All right, now I'm going to approach what's been marked for identification as State's Exhibit AB. Do you recognize the contents of this envelope?
Yes, I do.
All right, can you tell the jury how you recognize the contents of State's AB?
It's an office envelope that I put the ammunition, the test ammunition, down to take down to Miami.
All right, now when you say test ammunition, what do you mean by that?
It's just ammunition that's not was not related to the crime or the scene in any way.
All right, so essentially store-bought .357 ammo?
Yes.
Now, when you arrived down at the Miami Medical Examiner's office, what items did you turn over to the medical examiner's office?
The firearm and the ammunition.
And did you remain present while they were taking photographs and doing the testing?
Yes.
I'm going to show you up on your monitor right there, State's AD for identification. Now, we're looking at state's AD in the photograph. The last three digits are 283.
All right, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Interlocutor. Are you saying Alpha Dog?
Yes, sorry.
T.
T?
Yeah, A-T.
Sorry.
That's all right, no problem. Go
Uh,
ahead.
Now, looking at state's AT and photograph, last three digits 283. Do you recognize this photograph?
Yes.
All right, and how do you recognize this photograph?
This is the photograph of as the firearm is fired, a photograph taken of the projectile exiting the barrel of the gun.
And this is that high-speed photography?
Yes.
All right, going to the next photograph. Last is 002. Do you recognize this photograph?
Yes, it's a similar picture. There were several photographs taken as a round was ejected from the firearm.
Going to the next photograph. 003.
Another photograph with a projectile at a different distance as it was fired from the pistol.
Going to the next photograph. 004.
Another photograph of the projectile as it exited the pistol at a different distance.
All right, going to the next photograph. 005.
Another photograph of the projectile exiting the firearm.
Next photograph.
It's the photograph of the pistol and the equipment used to fire the firearm.
Now, upon conclusion of having this firearm tested and photographed with this high-speed photography down at the Miami Medical Examiner's office, did you return the firearm and that ammunition back to your agency's evidence unit?
Yes.
Just a moment. No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross.
Your Honor, we would like to approach in a sidebar on a matter. Well, just one moment, please. I'll do some limited cross and then at appropriate time sidebar. Good morning.
Good morning.
As to these photographs that have been not introduced but identified by you, you didn't take the photographs, did you?
No, I did not.
Were you present when they were taken?
Yes.
They were taken by somebody else, correct?
Correct.
They were actually enhanced, weren't they? In other words, the photographs that you identified have been enhanced, have they not? The resolution has been enhanced.
I believe so, yes.
So they really don't, when you said show, truly and accurately depict what is shown therein, the photos really don't show the actual picture of what was taken down there, do they?
The photographs show the projectiles exiting the firearm. That's
After the photographs have been enhanced by either you or by the photographer, correct?
correct.
And also, they're not the same size, are they? They've been downsized, correct?
I received large prints. That's what I viewed.
And they have been downsized, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we have the photographs that you said were true and accurate depictions, and now we know that they have been downsized and that they do not accurately depict the resolution or the brightness of the actual photograph when it was taken, correct?
The photographs appear to be enhanced from what I saw.
Well, what you saw was the photograph. These things take photographs of something in a millisecond, don't they?
Yes.
So you can't tell us the photograph that you saw is actually what your eye saw, correct?
Correct.
So when you say you saw it, what you really mean is you saw the picture after the photograph had been taken, after it had been enhanced and downsized, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, earlier you indicated that you were the lead detective, correct?
Yes.
And as a lead detective, would you make decisions about what would be tested and not tested?
Yes, I would confer with the crime scene investigators. Yes.
And who did you confer with?
Regarding what?
Confer with what would be tested or not tested? Did you confer with Ms. Vibert?
Yes, but could you be more specific on what test
Oh,
you're
I
talking
will. Was it your decision or her decision not to do a DNA testing on the holster in the master bedroom?
I don't recall discussing the DNA for the holster.
Were you there when Ms. Vibert was conducting DNA swabbings of various elements there?
No, I was not.
You were not there?
No.
Did you arrive later than that?
At the residence?
Yes.
Yes, I did.
So were you there when Mrs. Ward's body was still there?
Yes.
And was there a discussion about doing any GSR testing on her hands prior to leaving the scene?
No, not at that time.
Okay. So you had no discussions with anybody, anyone from the medical examiner's office or anyone else about doing a GSR testing, gunshot residue testing on her hands at the scene, correct?
We would not do that at the scene. We do not touch the bodies at the scene.
Well, but in conjunction with the medical examiner, you could do that, could you not?
At a later date.
Pardon me?
Possibly at a later date.
So in conjunction with the medical examiner's office, now, she had been there in the room for some time, correct?
Yes.
So this was not a situation in which you would need, wasn't an outdoor environment where you had to worry about the deceased having rain or some sort of outdoor element affecting the scene, correct?
Correct.
It was a controlled environment in the bedroom, correct?
Yes. Yes.
And so the necessity for kind of moving her expeditiously, really, there wasn't any need for an expeditious movement based on the environment in the room, correct?
Right.
And so one could have, as the lead detective, asked for an opinion about conducting some sort of gunshot residue on Mrs. Ward's hands if you chose to, correct?
That is not what I would normally do, is request a gunshot residue at a scene.
Well, you didn't do that, did you?
No, we wouldn't do that. We do not touch the bodies at the scene.
Well, now, well, tell us about what you did later to do any gunshot residue on her clothing.
I did not, no.
Did you, as a lead detective, ask anybody, would you please run some gunshot residue on the clothing of Mrs. Ward? Did you
No.
do that?
No.
Do you know whether anybody else did that?
I don't recall.
Okay. Now, in terms of the DNA sampling, as a lead detective, did you say, all right, we need to do some DNA sampling here on other items other than the gun, like the holster? Did you discuss that with anyone?
Well, there were numerous items I've collected, and we would discuss what items would be submitted for DNA.
Pardon me?
There were numerous items collected from the residents, and then at a later time, there would be discussions on what would be submitted for DNA testing.
Okay. Well, some items were tested out there in the scene, correct?
That's possible. I do not remember that. I may not have been there.
Well, are you a lead detective? Are you aware whether there was any DNA testing of the gun by Mrs. Vibert at the scene that evening or in the early morning hours of September the 22nd?
I'm not aware of any DNA testing at the scene.
Okay. So you're unaware of no DNA testing at the scene?
Correct.
And did you have a meeting with Ms. Vibert afterwards to determine what you wanted to test and not test?
I believe so. I don't recall the exact date or conversation.
Well, for example, was there a discussion where you actually discussed with her whether or not DNA testing would take place on the holster?
I don't remember specifically the DNA testing on the holster, the conversation regarding that.
Now, let me frame it for you. Was there a meeting between you and Ms. Vibert and others involved, the investigative team, where you sat down and discussed what leads needed to be followed up on and what tests needed to be taken?
I don't recall any one meeting. There could have been several phone conversations or actually meeting with her, but I don't remember one particular meeting about any specific item.
Okay. So so you don't remember any discussion at all about GSR testing on any clothing. Is that right?
I knew that it would be submitted for testing. I don't remember an actual conversation with her.
Well, you're the lead detective. Was there any GSR testing done on either Mr. Ward's clothing or on Mrs. Ward's clothing?
Yes, Mr. Ward's clothing was collected and to be submitted.
Are you telling us, as the lead investigator, that there was GSR testing on Mr. Ward's clothing?
I believe there was a GSR kit done for Mr. Ward at the office.
Well, for his hands. I'm asking whether or not, as a lead investigator, whether or not you're aware of any GSR testing on either the clothing of Mr. Ward or Mrs. Ward.
No, I don't recall any additional.
So let's go to the issue of fingerprints. Now, you were at the scene, correct?
Yes.
Now, were you at the scene when on one side of the bed there was a laptop with Diane Ward's laptop? It was kind of still on the bed on the other side from where her body was.
Yes.
All right. Now, her body was found on the other side, kind of close to that. There's a narrow area there between the bed and the wall, correct?
Right.
And in that capacity, that nightstand on that side is where the gun was found, correct?
I don't recall which nightstand the gun was located.
As the lead investigator of this case, you do not recall which nightstand the gun was located in?
Right. The gun was removed from the top drawer. I don't recall which side of the bed that gun was found.
Do you recall which side of the bed the holster was taken from?
No, I do not.
And let me get it straight. You were the man in charge of making decisions about what needed to be tested and not tested, correct? As the lead investigator.
Yes.
Now, tell me about your decisions concerning fingerprints. What did you do concerning fingerprints?
Could you be more specific?
Well, did you ask the crime scene investigator, Ms. Vibert, to run any fingerprint analysis on the bedside table where the gun was found?
No, I did not remember specifically asking her to do fingerprints of the
Okay.
bed.
The gun was found in a drawer. Do you remember that?
That's what I found out, yes.
So, well, let me ask, do you of your personal knowledge know that?
Yes, I was informed that a firearm was recovered from a drawer. I did not see it.
You went out when the search warrant. You were there when y'all went in the house after obtaining a search warrant, correct?
Correct.
And I believe we have a photograph of you kind of reading the search warrant there at the front door.
Yes.
All right. In you go. Did you take over the investigation as the lead investigator? I just promoted you to an attorney. I don't know whether that's a promotion or not, but I'll correct it. As the lead investigator, you were in charge of what was happening there on the scene. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, the search was going on and a firearm was located. I believe it was the crime scene investigator Wood that located the firearm.
Okay. So now when you as the lead investigator were there on the scene, and did you call anyone to come out to the scene to do, for example, an analysis on the scene before anything had been moved regarding blood patterns?
No, I did not.
Now, I would assume that there are individuals in the sheriff's office that could be mobilized to come out and, before Mrs. Ward is moved, to do an analysis of the blood patterns.
Your Honor, objection. Facts on evidence.
Sustained. Rephrase.
Well, I'll ask the question. Are there people in the sheriff's office who do blood pattern analysis?
Not that I'm aware of. The crime scene investigators that were on the scene have very much experience in that.
So you're saying the people on the scene they're the experts?
I would definitely confer with them. There was no one that I knew to call out in that situation for anything additional.
All right. Now, what did you do to did you do anything to take the wall away, or where the blood pattern was on the wall? Did you take that and have that either removed from the wall? What did you do to take the wall from the scene so you could do a blood pattern analysis?
I did not do anything to the wall. That was up to the crime scene investigators to decide what they wanted to do with the blood patterns on the wall.
But you were the lead investigator, right?
Yes,
And you know that they didn't take any segment of the wall from the bedroom. You know that, don't you?
yes, I know the portion of the wall was not taken.
Okay. Now, when you were making decisions about what to test and what not to test, so we've talked about the gunshot residue. Did you do any testing on the clothes for any kind of stippling residues on the clothes of either Mr. Ward or Mrs. Ward?
I did not.
And do you know what stippling is?
Yes.
Tell the jury what stippling is.
Stippling would be unburned particles that strike the skin when the firearm is fired.
Okay. And you did no testing on the clothes of either Mr. Ward or Mrs. Ward regarding the location of any stippling, did you?
I did not.
Well, you're the lead investigator. Do you know of anyone who did any test at all regarding stippling on the clothes of Mr. Ward or Mrs. Ward?
A discussion was made with the medical examiner to attempt to determine the distance that the individual was from the end of the firearm.
Well, that's a different issue. That has to do, does it not, with some trying to get some sort of rough estimate about a distance regarding stippling on the face. Is that right?
Yes.
What I'm asking is a different question. What I'm asking is stippling on the clothes to determine whether or not the stippling is something that goes out from the gun, correct, in the direction of where the muzzle is pointed, correct?
Yes.
All right. Now we've got the two different things. Stippling is the hot particles, correct?
Right.
That's a little different than gunshot residue, isn't it?
Yes.
Tell us what gunshot residue is.
Gunshot residue is particles that could be emitted from a firearm, could be, if a firearm is fired, particles that would land on any object.
Okay, so the gunshot residue is supposed to come out in this kind of this vaporous cloud, is that right?
I believe so.
Pardon me?
Possibly particles.
Okay, well, when you say possibly, I don't understand that. What do you mean possibly? Does the gunshot residue come out in this vaporous cloud or not?
I wouldn't describe it as a vaporous cloud. My
You would not.
understanding is particles emitted from a gun.
And how, and what part, excuse me, what part of the gun or the ammo does the gunshot residue come from?
It could come from anywhere, from the gun, from the barrel, or the cylinders.
No, what creates it? What makes the gunshot residue?
I'm not.
Sustained.
All right, so can we move on? You don't have expertise in this area, is that right?
Correct.
All right. So we go there, and we now have the situation where, are you giving commands to the individuals who are doing the testing at the scene as to what they should and should not do?
They also work independently. I was not at the scene the whole time. I was at the office also.
All right, now as it relates to Mrs. Ward, there were, at some point in time, we established that there was no GSR testing of her hands, right?
Correct.
At the scene,
Right.
correct? Now, were you there when her hands were bagged?
I was there when, yes, she was placed in the bag.
Well, no, different question. Were you there when her hands were bagged?
I was in the general vicinity because that was all done around the same time.
Okay, and by bagging her hands, I'm asking you is, does that mean that literally bags were kind of put over her hands and then taped around her hands and also her feet, correct?
Correct.
And that would, as the lead investigator, you would know that that is so that if anything were on her hands and fell off, then it could be contained within the bag, right?
Yes.
So the bagging of the hands, because her body went on somewhat of a journey, right? It had to go on a gurney, correct?
Yes.
then they had to go down the stairs, and they had to go some 10 miles to the medical examiners at the morgue, right?
Yes.
And so during that process, particularly when it relates to things like gunshot residue, you may have a jostling of the hands, and it's very sensitive. Gunshot residue can fall off, right?
I'd imagine so.
And as a lead investigator, tell us, did you or did you not direct that the interior or the contents of the bags on her hands be tested at some date after, when she is there for her autopsy, that the bags be kept and the bags be tested, the interior of the bags be tested for gunshot residue?
No, I did not.
So, and to your knowledge as a lead investigator, it was never done, was it?
No, I don't believe so.
So if gunshot residue had fallen off of Mrs. Ward's hands during this jostling and moving and the transportation, and prior to the bags being removed, then whatever was in the bag was never tested, was it?
Correct.
But you told us a minute ago the reason why you bagged the hands in the first place is so that people will then be able, if anything falls off the hands, then it would be collected in the bag, right?
It's to protect any trace evidence that could be on someone's hands.
But there's no sense in putting the bags on the hands if you don't test the bags to find out what came off her hands, is there?
Argumentative, and it goes beyond his expertise.
Sustained on both grounds?
Just one moment, Your Honor. Just one or two quick questions. As it relates to where the gun was located, the crime scene investigator wasn't the one that found that. Mr. Ward had told the law enforcement where the gun was, hadn't he?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Mr. Ward had told the law enforcement officers where the gun was, correct?
Yes, either the officers or the 911 operator. I believe it was relayed over the 911 system.
That's when he was calling in to have authorities go to the house, correct?
Yes.
That's all I have, Your Honor.
Redirect? Sure.
All right. Now, Mr. Cross, this occurred back in 2009, correct?
Yes.
All right, it's almost 9 years now.
Right.
Safe to say you've attended other crime scenes?
Yes.
All right. The fact that you don't memorize this case picture perfect from almost 9 years ago, is that because of lapse of time?
Yes.
Now, when it comes to the photographs,
Pardon me, objection, Your Honor, leading.
Overruled. The witness already answered the question. Go ahead.
when it comes to photographs and the defense said downsizing, how did you originally receive the photographs?
I, sometime that same day, I received prints, large prints of the photographs.
All right. And so what you saw here today were just digital versions of that print.
Yes.
And as far as enhancing goes, was that just to enhance what's visible on the photograph? Or did you look at the photograph and say, you know what, the explosion's not big enough, we need bigger explosion, Michael Bay this photograph up?
Objection, Your Honor, leading.
Overruled. You can answer.
The photographs appeared to be what I remember what I saw in person.
Now, in regards to the shooting and stippling on the victim's clothing, that occurs when an individual, shooting and stippling occurs on an individual when they've been shot in close proximity with a firearm. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Was it abundantly clear to you that the victim, Diane Ward, had been shot?
Yes.
And did you attend her autopsy?
I did not.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
May this witness be excused.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Detective. You're free to go. Oh, I'm sorry. Defense, may he be excused?
That's fine, Your Honor. He may be excused.
You're free to go. Thank you. Call your next witness.
Roy Cobert.
Let me see the attorneys at sidebar, please. You may inquire. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I do.
You may inquire.
Thank you. Good morning, sir. Can you tell us your first and last name and then spell your last name?
Certainly. My name is Roy Cobert, K-O-B-E-R-T.
What do you do for a living?
I am a commercial bankruptcy lawyer here in Orlando.
How long have you practiced law in that area?
This is my 30th year. I'm board certified in business bankruptcy law.
In 2009, did you get retained to represent the trustee of a Chapter 7 liquidation bankruptcy involving Land Resource LLC and about 36 subsidiaries?
Yes.
And was the trustee of that bankruptcy a fellow named Lee Meininger?
Yes.
And the primary owner of that corporation or corporations was a person named James Robert Ward?
Correct.
Do you see James Robert Ward in the courtroom today?
I do.
And is it the gentleman who just stood up in the reddish-orangish tie?
Colorblind, but it looks reddish, orangish to me. Yes.
May the record reflect he's identified the defendant. And as the attorney to the trustee of this bankruptcy, are you given the right to what we would call in criminal depose witnesses, take their deposition, or in your world, take a 2004 examination?
Yes. We basically, in a Chapter 7, as you refer to, we step in the shoes of the debtor and we look into transactions, yes.
And so, is there really any limitations as to, like, the relevance of questions you can ask during these 2004 examinations?
No. By definition, it could be akin to a fishing expedition. There's nothing off base.
And when a business goes into liquidation bankruptcy, does the trustee, and you as the counsel for the trustee, have the right to go back and look at all the transactions involving money flowing out of the corporation for a period of about 4 years?
Yes.
And also, as the attorney for the trustee of this bankruptcy, could you investigate and look into all the money flowing into people's bank accounts or other things such as Mr. Ward, Mrs. Ward, their daughters, and any trusts that the family was involved in?
Yes, that's one of our primary responsibilities.
Now, did you have Mr. and Mrs. Ward set for this examination on September 24th of 2009?
Could you tell me what day of the week that was?
It's a
that a
Thursday,
Thursday?
and may I approach with AO for identification?
You may.
Can I get my glasses?
Yes, sir.
Yes, we had an agreed.
Well, let me
Yes.
stop
Yes.
and ask you a question. First of all, do you recognize AO for identification?
I do. That's
Hold on. So it's a
Yes.
yes.
That's a yes.
All right. And now, is this the notice for Mrs. Ward's examination?
yes,
And was it set to occur on September 24th, 2009?
yes,
And does this document also outline all the documents that you were hoping to get into with Mrs. Ward?
yes.
And was this a similar notice to as what you would have sent Mr. Ward?
I believe so. Yes,
And the way it works, I believe, from our conversation with Mr. Meininger, is the court grants you leave to do these things. You all voluntarily agree to set these dates, but there's not a per se subpoena or court order for these dates. Is that a fair?
correct. The court expects us as professionals to coordinate dates, and we did.
All right. Now, on September 18th, the Friday before this examination was set to go down, did you have an after-hours phone conversation with Mr. Ward, Mrs. Ward, his attorney, Elizabeth Green, her attorney, David Landis, and yourself?
All four of them called me.
So it's a yes?
Yes,
Okay. And in that conversation, did Mr. Ward express the belief that his wife, Mrs. Ward, shouldn't be examined at all?
yes,
And did he express displeasure that she was to be set before him?
yes,
All right. Now, did you all leave with any sort of agreement as to what was going to go on, or was it their position, no, Mrs. Ward is not coming that Thursday, and your position was, well, I guess maybe I'll see about getting a court order? Is that a fair assessment?
We agreed to disagree. I was going forward Thursday.
All right. At this time, Your Honor, the state would move AO for identification and evidence.
Any objection? No objection. All right, this will be received without objection as State's Exhibit number 17.
And did those documents in AO, which has now come in as State's 17, I believe she said, did it indicate that you were going to be asking about the financials for the past 4 years with the Ward's family?
Clearly, yes.
Okay. Now, was one of the creditors to these corporations a company named Bond Safeguard Insurance Company?
They were the largest creditor.
Okay. Now, had they, separate and apart from the bankruptcy that you were representing Mr. Meininger as the trustee as, did they separately file a suit against Mr. and Mrs. Ward on about September 1st of 2009?
Yes.
And obviously, as the attorney for the trustee of the bankruptcy, at some point you told them, listen, get in line with the rest of everybody else, right?
Right. We want to pay the creditors pro rata. We understand their frustration, but it needs to be one centralized process.
Right. But as of September 21st, 2009, that lawsuit that they had filed, Bond Safeguard Company, against the Wards was still pending. You hadn't done that process yet. Is that fair?
Yes.
All right. Now, may I approach the witness with AK for identification?
You may.
It's actually 7 in evidence as well.
All right.
Now, could you read this? And I understand it was addressed primarily to Mr. Meininger, but do you recognize your email address as one of the people that this email was addressed to?
Yes, mine appears as the first email address.
And do you recognize the contents of this email with the subject line and the contents of the email? Was that something that was sent to you as well in the early morning hours of September 21st and into the early morning hours of the 22nd?
Yes, it was addressed to me, and it's dated September 22nd at 1:33 in the morning.
All right. And so you received a copy of that email yourself?
It was addressed to me, yes.
No other questions of this witness?
Cross. Yes, sir. All right, may this witness be excused?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, sir, thank you. You're free to go.
Thank you, Judge.
Call your next witness.
Jessica Schoenfield?
May I inquire?
Good morning, ma'am. Can you tell us your name and spell your, I got it. First and last name?
Jessica Schoenfeld, Jessica-Schonefeld.
And what do you do for a living?
I'm currently a registered nurse.
Back in 2009, what were you doing for a living in September?
I was a medical legal investigator for the medical examiner's office.
And is the medical examiner's office a law enforcement agency?
No,
Can you tell us more about what it is?
it is a office that investigates the cause and manner of death for people who pass away in Orange and Osceola County.
And either in the late evening hours of September 21st of 2009 or the early morning hours of September 22nd, 2009, were you called out to a scene of a dead body out in Islesworth?
I was.
Do you recall about what time that happened?
I believe it was around between 3 and 4 in the morning.
And do you recall about when you arrived?
I can't say the exact time. I know that it was approximately a half hour after I received the initial notification.
Okay. And now, are there Florida statutes governing what the medical examiner's office is and what your jurisdiction is?
Yes.
Are you aware of those back in 2009 as an investigator for the medical examiner?
Yes.
And so when it comes to a crime scene or a suspicious death or anything within your purview, is there statutory rules about who who the body belongs to, whose jurisdiction that is?
Yes.
And what is that rule?
The indication is that if the medical examiner has accepted jurisdiction to investigate a death, that the body, as you say, is then their jurisdiction. So nothing should be done to manipulate that body until someone representing the medical examiner is present on scene and has documented the body and obtained permission for anything to happen.
Now, do you make that call as the investigator, or does somebody else?
I will represent the medical examiner based on the delineated rules. So I would say, yes, what's okay and what's not okay based on the general understanding that the medical examiner has put upon the investigators. But if there's specific requests by law enforcement, I will then call the medical examiner and obtain certain permissions.
Well, I guess what I'm asking is, do you get that phone call at 3 or 4 in the morning from somebody in law enforcement, and then you make the decision whether the medical examiner's office accepts jurisdiction? Or are you getting the phone call from somebody in the medical examiner's office saying, jurisdiction's been accepted, get out of bed?
I make the determination.
Okay. And so based on, is it fair to say that you received some information about what people had observed at this scene?
Correct.
And based upon what was relayed to you, you made a decision that the medical examiner's office would accept jurisdiction.
Yes.
And then you got dressed and got out there.
No, I was currently dressed in the capacity of medical examiner. We are essentially on call during that time, so.
Okay. All right, so you get out there, and what do you do first?
The first thing I do is, before entering the scene, is I obtain permission from law enforcement as to where I can enter, what's okay for me to walk, where it is okay for me to walk, that kind of thing.
After being briefed on that, what did you do?
I started taking photographs.
All right. Permission to begin working with AU for identification with the witness?
Granted.
All right, do you have a screen up in front of you with a series of digital images in a directory?
I do.
All right, so we're looking at AU for identification. I'm going to look at first image number 1 in this directory. Are you familiar with this?
Yes.
And what is this?
It's a card that delineates the case number that's been assigned to this case, as well as the date that the picture is being taken and the name of the person as we understand it at that moment.
And was your understanding at that moment Wood instead of Ward?
Correct.
Okay. And I'm going to show you a few more images here. Image 8, opportunity to see that?
Yes.
Image 38,
Yes.
image 51,
Yes.
image 53,
Yes.
image 62,
Yes.
image 67.
Yes.
All right. So for those images that I showed you, and do the file names also reflect the medical examiner case number?
I can't see
Oh,
them
I'm
and I
sorry,
don't
I took it
recall.
away. That was very mean. Let me do that. There.
I believe so.
I can show you your first card again.
Thank you, if you want to. Yes.
All right, and were all those images that you had an opportunity to look at, does that fair and accurately depict what you saw as you went through the scene and documented it?
Correct.
And is it fair to say that some of those were taken just as documentation before any process began, but then some of that reflected the process of Mrs. Ward being bagged up?
Yes.
Now, who takes those photographs as she is being bagged up? Are you still taking those photographs, or is somebody assisting you?
No, I take all the photographs.
All right, so after doing your preliminary documentation photographs, what is your next step?
The next step would be to discuss with law enforcement on scene the circumstances that they understand happened to where the person had passed away. After obtaining those circumstances, I will take more detailed photographs of the person who's passed and anything that pertains to the cause and potential manner of death.
Okay. And is it fair to say that the photographs that we went through in no way reflect all of the photographs that you took?
Correct.
All right. Now, once you're done with your more specific documentation of Mrs. Ward, is that when you begin to package?
Yes.
What is the first step in packaging?
The first step is to just do a visual overview of the person who's passed away and ensure that there's nothing that potentially would be affected by us moving her in any way. So if there's anything that might fall off or if there's something laying on them, we might remove a blanket, for example. And then after we've examined her in this particular instance, we would then start to package her hands and feet to ensure that anything that was present there would not be disrupted in the moving of her into a body bag.
Now, in taking these photographs of Mrs. Ward, do you manipulate her body in any way to take photographs?
I can't recall in this specific case, but yes, there are times in which we might manipulate the body to take photographs in order to take better pictures of, for example, an injury, or if they're in a particular position where you can't see their entire body, we might turn them or something of that nature.
All right. Now, did you do any GSR testing on Mrs. Ward's hands?
That doesn't fall under my scope of practice.
And what do you mean that doesn't fall under your scope of practice?
It's not my responsibility as a medical examiner to do GSR.
All right. So what is your understanding of when that gets done on a deceased person based on protocol?
My understanding is that usually gets done, if not on scene specifically requested by law enforcement, then it would be at the medical examiner's office.
Now, if law enforcement specifically requested that on scene, would you be the authority to decide that, or would the medical examiner?
No, sir. We would call the medical examiner to obtain permission.
And was there any blood on Mrs. Ward's hands when you documented her?
I don't recall. I would have to look at photographs.
I'll strike that question. Now, if there were blood on her hands, have you ever done GSR testing?
No,
Okay, so you don't even know how it's performed.
no.
So did you do any testing, like swabbing her hands for blood testing or DNA testing?
No.
Why not?
That's not usually done on scene. It's usually reserved for the controlled environment of the medical examiner's office.
Okay. And obviously, she was on the floor in a bedroom there?
Correct.
Was she in a pool of blood?
Yes.
And are you familiar with the autopsy process?
I'm familiar of it in basic terms, but I don't know in detail specifically everything that happens.
Is it performed on a table?
Yes.
And at some point, do they clean the body after documenting as the body comes in? They call it dirty.
It's usually done after any and all evidence or materials have been removed from the body, and they will begin the autopsy by usually cleaning, yes.
So is it fair to say that on the scene is not the ideal area to be processing a body?
Correct.
All right. And so bring us back. Did you testify that you put bags on her hands and her feet?
I did.
And what is the purpose of doing that?
Usually it depends on the circumstances of whomever passed away, but the reasoning behind that is that during the transport process, we want to preserve the body in as much detail as they were on scene before they go to the medical examiner's office. So part of that is bagging hands and feet to ensure that they stay in as much the same condition that they were on scene as when the medical examiner would be observing them.
And do you get assistance in moving the body and bagging the body?
If it is beyond my physical capability, yes.
All right. Do you have any specific memory of whether, in this case, you needed help?
I don't believe I needed help.
All right. And this was on the second floor of this home?
Correct.
And did you need any assistance in getting her down to the first floor of this home?
We employ a body removal agency. They're contracted through the medical examiner's office, and they usually will be, after I've helped prepare the body for transport, they will be the ones that move them.
Do you oversee that process?
Correct, yes.
Did they drop her down the stairs or anything?
No,
Did you see any severe jostling or bumping?
not severe.
And do you drive her back to the medical examiner's office, or does this company?
The company will drive her back.
And are you in the vehicle?
I'm not in the vehicle. I will either precede the vehicle or follow them to the medical examiner's office.
And did you go over any dirt roads?
Not that I remember.
Do you remember any rough bumps?
No.
And back then, was the medical examiner's office downtown in the hospital district, or had they moved over to Bumby, Michigan yet?
I can't recall. I know it was in that year and around that time that we had moved to Bumby in Michigan. That office didn't open until October, so it may have been the downtown office.
Okay. Now let's go back to the collection and bagging of the body. After you bag up the hands and feet, what's the next step?
The next step would then be to place the deceased person into a clean sheet and shroud, which is essentially a plastic covering. And then because of the circumstances in this specific case, we put her then into a sealed body bag.
And why is it a sealed body bag?
It's sealed to preserve, again, any sort of evidence or tampering that would occur between the time that I'm directly observing her until she arrives at the medical examiner's office.
And what happens when you all arrive at the medical examiner's office?
She is brought into the intake area, and at that point, she would be moved from the gurney, the transport gurney, onto an autopsy table. She would be weighed, and her height and weight would be documented. And then at that point, we would unseal the bag.
And why do you unseal the bag?
The bag is plastic, and so we would need to unseal it and unzip it to prevent any further decomposition by trapping in any heat, moisture, or anything of that nature.
And then is she put into an area of the medical examiner's office that's cooler?
Correct.
And what temperature are they kept at?
I can't remember the exact temperature, but I know it is below 45 degrees.
All right. Does that conclude your involvement with Mrs. Ward?
That would include my involvement with her direct person, yes.
No other questions?
Cross.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning.
Good morning.
We haven't met. My name is Mr. Gillen. I represent Mr. Ward.
Okay.
Have a few questions for you. So, what you told us is that you're kind of on, I guess you were running shifts, and you were working I assume the late shift, and you got the call to go out to the Ward home. Is that right?
Yes.
And you drive out there, and once the determination is made, that you indicated that the medical examiner would then, and you're the representative of the medical examiner, would then have custody over Mrs. Ward's body, correct?
Yes, sir.
And so, but you said something a minute ago on direct examination I wanted to ask you about. First of all, you are not trained in doing gunshot residue, correct?
I'm not.
People in law enforcement, the sheriff's office would be doing that, correct?
That's correct.
Of course, they were there when you arrived, right?
Yes.
Now, what you said is that once, as it relates to the body, anything that would be, any testing that would be done would have to be done with the approval of the a medical examiner's office, you or the medical examiner, correct?
That's the usual way of things, yes.
Okay. Now, what you said on direct examination, you were asked whether or not GSR or gunshot residue testing is done at the scene on a body before it has been moved, and you said not usually, correct?
Correct.
But only if requested by law enforcement, correct?
There are times when law enforcement may request, yes.
So that you have been involved in occasions when law enforcement, or aware of occasions where law enforcement at a scene where the medical examiners have taken control of the body and law enforcement has asked the medical examiner's office to either conduct or permit to be conducted gunshot residue on a victim, correct?
Objection to the relevance of other cases.
Sustained. Rephrase the question.
Now, you told us on direct examination that it was not usual, but that it had occurred, correct?
I have not been directly involved in any cases where it has occurred, but I am aware of them, yes.
But you're aware. Now, so on the night, or I guess in the early morning hours of September the 22nd, 2009, did anyone in law enforcement from the sheriff's office ask you, as the representative of the medical examiners, whether or not they could have permission to do gunshot residue testing on Mrs. Ward's hands?
Not that I recall.
And if they had have asked that, then you would have gotten, or at least passed that request on to the medical examiner to either say yes or no, correct?
Yes.
But what you do recall is you weren't even asked, were you?
I don't recall if I was asked or not.
Now, what you do is then you physically, you're the individual who bags up the hands and the feet, correct?
Yes, sir.
And when you do that so that you can preserve whatever might be on the hands if it falls off the hands, right?
Correct.
And that way, for example, you got to bag the hands, and the bags are in physical contact, I assume, with the hands at some point during this process of bagging.
It's possible that that would occur, yes.
Okay. And so what you're trying to do in doing your job is to make sure that whatever is on Mrs. Ward's hands, whatever evidence may or may not be there, that by putting the bag on, that you're then able to then preserve whatever might be on her hands if it happens to fall off or rub off, correct?
That's the general purpose, yes.
Is that the main purpose?
Yes.
Okay. And so then if that is the purpose, then of course, let me ask you this. Were you involved in any testing of the bags that were put on Mrs. Ward's hands?
No.
Were you aware of any testing of the interior of the bags that you put on her hands?
No.
Yet the purpose of your putting the bags on her hands would be to preserve whatever evidence might fall off her hands, and so that it wouldn't be lost and it would be able to be retrieved and tested so that people could find out what happened, right?
Yes, that is my understanding.
Now, you were not involved in the autopsy in this case, were you?
No.
So you weren't present there.
No.
When Mrs. Ward was taken, and then you indicated that she was put in a bag, correct?
Correct.
And that also, you indicated that is another way of kind of preserving what evidence might be there,
Yeah.
correct? Not only on her hands, but because the bag covers, you've got her hands and her feet bagged, correct?
Correct.
And then after that, then the entire body is bagged, correct?
She's wrapped in a sheet and shroud, and then she's placed into a bag, yes.
Okay. So that if there is anything or any evidence that might have been contained on her body or her clothes or any of that, then that should protect that, and you'd be able to test that if you wanted to as well, correct?
I don't know about the testing, but that would be the idea of doing that, yes, is to preserve.
So the idea that you do it in the first place is to preserve what evidence may be on her body and on her clothes. correct?
Correct.
Now, what happens is that after she is put in the body bag, then she is put on a gurney.
Right, a transport gurney.
Yeah, and then this was like on the second floor. She's taken downstairs, and then she goes out into an ambulance, I assume?
It's a modified van.
Okay. And that you didn't ride in the van, you follow the van.
I can't remember if I followed or went ahead, but yes, she's in that van.
You don't know what was going on in the van in terms of, any bumps or anything else. You asked whether or not there were bumps. You weren't in the van. You can't tell, can you?
I was not there.
Okay. The reason why I put the bags on is if there is any loss, then somebody would be able to find out what came off her hand down the road, right?
That's my understanding.
Sure. And so she goes, you take her to the you take her to the morgue, right?
Yes.
And then she is weighed and measured in terms of her height and weight, correct?
Yes.
And then she is put, now the bags on her hands are still on her hands, aren't they?
Correct.
And then she is put in sort of an area that is cooler or colder in order to preserve her body for the subsequent autopsy which would occur.
Yes.
Now, were you present when the bags were ultimately taken off her hands?
No.
Were you present at all when any GSR testing was done on her hands in any capacity?
No.
One moment, Your Honor. That's all the questions I have of this witness, Your Honor.
Redirect.
Briefly. There was some discussion about the purpose of bagging the hands and feet to preserve evidence. Do you remember that discussion?
Yes.
Is GSR evidence the only evidence that needs to be preserved on one's hands and feet?
No.
Does blood pattern evidence need to be preserved on one's hands?
Yes.
And I know you're not familiar with it, but if GSR involves stamping somebody's hands repeatedly.
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of foundation.
I haven't heard the question yet, so let me hear the question.
If gunshot residue testing involves stamping one's hands repeatedly, could that disturb any blood pattern evidence on the hand?
Objection, Your Honor.
Overrule. Go ahead.
You can answer.
I believe that, yes, it could disturb it.
And DNA evidence, is that part of the reason to bag somebody's hands and feet? To potentially protect any DNA evidence from a source other than that person?
Any and all evidence, yes.
Okay. And did she have, Mrs. Ward, have blood patterns on other parts of her body besides her hands?
Yes.
So if her hands were not bagged, could there have been intermingling between these different blood patterns that weren't on her hands, but because they weren't bagged, now it was
Objection
transferred?
outside the scope of cross.
Overruled. Go ahead.
Yes.
And you said that the paper bags are left on when a body is put into the refrigerator?
Yes.
And why are they left on even then?
Even then, despite the fact that we've opened the bag, it's still covering the person who's passed away. So again, to prevent any transfer, any sort of disruption of her.
Does a paper bag present any danger of containing heat and creating condensation like a plastic bag?
No, sir.
No other questions?
May this witness be excused.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, ma'am. You're free to go. You all need a break, or jury, you need a break? All right, I'm getting a yes from one of them, so let's take a 15-minute break. All right, thanks. All right, before we bring the jury back in, can we put Mr. Ward under oath, please? Mr. Ward, from the beginning of the trial, the court provided you with a hearing device because you were having some difficulty hearing. Is that correct? Yes, Judge. First, I have trouble hearing you. All right, because I have noticed. I'm sorry. What did you just? Can you repeat what you said?
Here you go, Matt. Right here.
Judge, the person I have a problem hearing is you.
All right, that's what I wanted to clarify, because I have noticed that throughout the trial, you oftentimes don't have the hearing device on. And I
Yeah.
wanted to make sure that you're able to hear all of the witnesses and the testimony.
Yeah, thank you. No, I wasn't being critical of you. It's just for some reason, it's not coming over here very well. And I had a hearing test recently, and yes, I've lost about 30%.
Okay, so you have not had any difficulty hearing the trial,
I have not.
and the device is working fine,
It's working great.
and you can use it whenever you need, correct?
Thank you. Thank you.
All right,
And
thank
she's
you
been
very
very
much.
nice about getting me a good one. It works great. Thank you.
All right. Ready?
Really quick, Judge, on the deposition.
Mike?
On the deposition of Dr. Goldberger, we have agreed on a time, but I was hoping that we would have the availability of the conference room that the deputies have been so kind to.
What time is it?
8:15 tomorrow.
Can we open the conference room? Sure, no problem.
Thank you so much, Your Honor.
You're, all right. Anything else? Let's bring the jury back in. State recognized presence of the jury? Yes, Your Honor. Defense? Yes, Your Honor. All right, have a seat, everyone. State, you may call your next witness.
Kelly Wood.
May I inquire?
Can you tell us your name, please, and spell your first and last name?
My name is Kelly Wood. It's Kelleywood.
Back in 2009, in September, where were you working?
The Orange County Medical Examiner's Office.
And what did you do for the medical examiner's office?
I was a autopsy technician.
And what does an autopsy technician do? You gave us
They-
the title.
right.
Give us the duties.
They assist the medical examiner in the performance of the autopsy of a decedent, and during that process, we take photographs, fingerprints, DNA samples for DNA toxicology, and basically just assist the medical examiner in the whole procedure.
Now, are you making like any calls or decision on your own, or is the medical examiner telling you what to do?
The medical examiner is directing you through the whole process.
Did you participate in an autopsy of somebody identified as Diane Ward on, I believe, September 23rd of 2009?
Yes, sir.
And who's the medical examiner that you performed that with?
It was Dr. Stephanie.
All right, and can you just bring us through the process of how these autopsies occur, beginning with how the body gets presented to you and the doctor? Just give us a rough overview.
Sure. Basically, in the morning, we arrive to work and we have a number amount of cases to do that day. The individuals are brought out to the autopsy suite in the morgue, and they're usually stored in the cooler first. So they're brought out in the morning. We're assigned, X amount of cases throughout the day, and then basically we start the procedure of do the identification of the decedent. We check the ID bands, have the case reports. We do overall photographs of everything, pretty much from start to finish. We document clothing, jewelry, any markings, evidence that comes in from the police department as well. And then pretty much we clean the body up after any evidence has been collected, so that way it's not disturbed prior to cleaning the body up. And then we pretty much start the autopsy with a medical examiner as far as doing the actual procedure itself.
So let's now talk about the specifics of this autopsy.
Right.
The body gets presented to you, and how is it presented to you? Do you remember how it's clothed, or if there's any bags on it? Can you describe that?
With this case in particular, they're usually contained inside the body bag. And then once that body bag is opened, we examine what is presented to us. If the body was clothed, if it wasn't. In this case, I remember it was clothed. There was, personal effects on the victim, and then we document that with photographs and notes as well.
Were the hands and feet bagged?
Yes, sir.
And the bags on the feet, were they over footwear?
I don't recall exactly. It would have been documented in the
Photographs would show us?
Right.
Okay.
Photographs and documentation of the autopsy.
And so you would have been the one taking the photographs during the autopsy process as the
Right.
doctor directs you?
Yes, sir.
And that's both the external and then later internal portion of the autopsy?
Correct.
Was there anything that the medical examiner directed you to do as far as the collection of evidence of the body before it was cleaned up?
They are always there to assist us. That way, any possible evidence that's there is not destroyed or contaminated. So, for instance, in this one, there were bags We cut those open carefully, examine if there's anything inside of the bags, preserve the bags, and then move forward if there's any more evidence to be collected.
All right. So let me approach you with AF and AG if the court will allow.
May.
Now, AF and AG, I know this is unfair, but these are bags prepared by somebody else, apparently the sheriff's office, correct? Is that fair?
Right.
And the actual bags that were on her hands and feet, did you then put them in bags?
Generally, yes. I don't recall specifically, but usually we do preserve them also in secondary paper bag.
All right. And then at the end of all this process at the medical examiner's office, do you turn all this evidence over to the Orange County Sheriff's Office?
Yes, sir.
All right. During the autopsy process, are you familiar with something called a DNA card?
Yes, sir.
And what is a DNA card?
Usually it's a size pretty much of a standard index card, and it has 4 round circles on there, and we'll collect a sample of the decedent's blood and drop a blood into each circle, and then that is collected and sent off to the lab for further testing if necessary.
And where is that blood collected from?
It varies, usually the femoral artery, or we can go into the carotid, the heart area.
All right, so femoral, I believe, is related to this femur bone in your leg. So is the femoral artery somewhere in your leg?
Correct. It's usually up by we'll go up to the groin area of the upper portion of the leg.
And is it fair to call that area like the bikini area?
Yes.
All right. May I approach with F for identification?
You may.
Again, it's a little unfair because this is an OCSO package, but does this appear to be able to contain something like on an index card that would be a DNA card?
Yes, sir.
And again, would that be something that gets turned over to OCSO and somebody comes and collects it?
Yes, sir.
Did you collect gunshot residue testing from Mrs. Ward
Yes, sir.
at the direction of the medical examiner?
Correct.
And at what point in this process is this before she gets washed and cleaned?
Definitely. Yes, sir.
All right. But is it after the photographs that are taken of her hands?
We do photographs during the whole process, pretty much. So once the
Well, let me-
bags are removed.
Let me back that up. Is this after the photographs of her hands before she gets cleaned?
Yes,
But before the photographs of her hands when they are cleaned?
correct. We do before and after complete photographs.
May I approach with O and T?
You may.
Again, super unfair. It's in packages of OCSO apparently. But does this appear to be the size and shape of gunshot residue kits?
Yes, sir.
And is that again something that would have been turned over to the sheriff's office after the conduction of the autopsy?
Yes, sir.
Had you ever collected gunshot residue before the autopsy of Mrs. Ward?
Yes, sir.
Approximately how many times?
A handful, maybe a dozen or so.
All right, and do you just make up how to do it, or are there instructions in these kits?
There are instructions in the kits.
And did you follow the instructions?
Yes, sir.
And how many, are these little stamps that you use to stamp the hands?
Correct.
How many stamps do you use per hand, at least back in 2009?
Different kits have different collection. Usually they have 2, sometimes they have 4, but generally there's 2 in each kit at least.
All right, so going with the hypothetical that there was 2, is that 1 per hand?
Yes, sir.
And if there was a kit that had 4, that would be top of one hand, bottom of one hand, and then top and bottom of the other hand?
Correct.
All right. And how many times do you stamp her hands, if you remember, to collect the GSR?
Basically, there's a sticky residue that's on the stamp itself, so you just continue blotting until that residue is pretty
Not
much
as
not
sticky?
sticky as mine.
All right. Now, the bags that her hands came in, did you use a GSR kit on those bags and blot these bags?
No, sir.
Have you ever done that?
No.
And her clothing, and you indicated some personal effects like jewelry, also turned over to the sheriff's office after the completion of the autopsy?
Correct.
No other questions?
Cross.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Sean Ellsworth. I represent Bob. Your job duties at this time were to assist the medical examiner with the autopsy.
Correct.
And one of those duties you were asked to do is perform the GSR test.
Yes, sir.
And had you received training to perform GSR tests prior to this?
On-job training.
Okay, so that means you watched other people do it and you helped?
Right.
Okay. When you first approached the body, there were bags on the hands.
Yes, sir.
Why?
To preserve any evidence that may be there.
Okay. Now, you were the one who cut the bags off the hands.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you did, when you cut those off carefully, right?
Correct. Mhm.
You were trained to cut those off carefully.
Yes, sir.
Why?
So that way, if there is any evidence inside those bags, it's not disturbed or damaged at all.
Okay. And you did cut them off carefully.
Yes, sir.
And then you examine what's in the bag, correct? When you cut it off?
Correct.
If there was GSR in the bag, we're not going to see that, are we, with our naked eye?
No.
That GSR is not in any form visible to the naked eye.
Correct.
So if there was GSR in the bags that you carefully cut off, that's not something you would have seen or anyone would have seen with a naked eye.
No.
And you didn't use any type of magnification to look inside that bag?
No, sir.
Do you know if anyone did?
Not that I know of.
So when you cut the bags off the hands, what did you do with the bags?
We collect them and then fold them back up so that way if there's any value of evidence inside the bags, it's still contained inside the bags. And then we package those separately into a secondary brown bag and seal it up for evidence to be picked up by the agency.
So you were very careful in your process with these bags that you had cut off.
Correct.
And the reason you were so careful was because there may be evidence in there that someone else would need to test.
Yes, sir.
Do you know if anyone else ever tested the inside of those bags?
I'm not aware.
Now, also part of your job at this autopsy was to collect fingernail clippings, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And the reason you were asked to do that and the reason you did that was because there may be some evidentiary value there, is that correct?
Correct.
And you were asked to do that?
Yes, sir.
By who?
The medical examiner.
Okay, and you complied?
Right.
And you explain how you do that.
We have fingernail clippings on hand, and we'll take a fingernail from, for each hand. So we'll use one fingernail clipper and remove the fingernails off the right hand. Those fingernail clippings are collected into a clean paper towel, and then we fold that up and preserve that, seal it for evidence, and then we move to the left hand. Use a new fingernail clipper, same process, remove the fingernails, package those up.
And you were directed to do everything you just described with regard to Mrs. Ward.
Yes, sir.
And you did everything you just described with Mrs. Ward.
That I remember.
Because there could be some evidentiary value in those fingernail clippings, correct?
Correct.
Could be DNA,
Yes.
could be hair,
Correct.
fibers,
Sir.
skin from another person.
Yes, sir.
And that's the reason why you did it carefully, you did it correctly, and you preserved them, didn't you?
Sir.
Do you know if those fingernail clippings were ever tested?
I don't know. Once it's submitted off to the agency, it's their process to do.
Thank you, ma'am. That's all I have.
Redirect. All right, may this witness be excused.
Excuse me.
Mr. Ellsworth,
Yes, ma'am.
may the witness be excused.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you, ma'am, you're free to go. State, call your next witness.
Amanda Vibert.
May I inquire?
All All right, good morning again.
Good morning.
Is your name still Amanda Vibert?
It is.
And now let's go into the background of what you do. What do you do for the Sheriff's Office?
I am a crime scene investigator with the Orange County Sheriff's Office since July of 2004. Just recently, in April of 2016, I switched over to a lab setting, and I'm the forensics firearm specialist in the lab of the forensics unit.
And what's your educational background in the area of criminal justice or forensic sciences?
I have a dual Bachelor of Science degree in criminology and sociology. I have a 2-year in crime scene technology. I am a senior certified crime scene investigator with the International Association for Identification. And through my training with the Orange County Sheriff's Office, I've taken numerous 40-hour workshops in forensic-related issues.
Now, prior to the evening of September 21st, 2009, approximately how many crime scenes had you been called out to process? Sorry.
Just let me think for 1 second. Approximately 600 to 700.
Approximately how many homicide investigations had you been involved with as far as the scene?
Approximately 30 plus.
Okay. Now, going back from yesterday, I believe you indicated that you kind of took over from another crime scene investigator around 2 or 3 in the morning?
That is correct. I believe it was 2:20 a.m.
All right. And you had already been briefed by law enforcement as to the nature of the investigation?
Yes, I met with CSI Kelly Wood at the scene, and she gave me a little description of why she was there.
And had you, and I apologize if I asked yesterday, had you been briefed on the contents of the 911 call that initiated this process?
I don't remember if I was briefed on the 911 call. I just knew that there was a deceased person in the residence.
And based on what you were briefed on, were you investigating this scene as a whodunit or as something that was suspected to have occurred between people living in that home?
It was suspected to be occurred with people living in the residence.
Now, the first step of your process after speaking with Ms. Wood is what?
After I spoke with Ms. Wood and she gave me an overall of the crime scene in the residence, I then started taking notes and taking my own photographs to document the crime scene.
All right. And after this walkthrough and note-taking process, what do you do next?
After I take notes and photograph the crime scene, I'm then going to document any specific areas of the crime scene that I want to take more photographs of. And then eventually the medical examiner would be called to remove the body.
And so that's what I'm getting at. So is there a process both before and then during the processing of the scene of you documenting this with photographs?
Yes.
All right. May I begin working with A.N. for identification with the witness, Judge?
You may.
Did you take photographs of the garage?
Yes, I did.
And did you take photographs essentially of every room in the house?
Yes, I took overall photographs of the entire residence.
And why do you do that if there seems to be a focus area, for instance, one room? Why do you document the whole home?
We document the whole home because there might be a separate area that we don't know about at the time, so we want to search all the areas. Also, just for if that ever goes to court purposes, the jury has a better idea of what the entire residence looked like versus just one specific area or location.
I'm going to quickly keep on scanning up until this image. Did you eventually, and the image I'm referring to is 345, did you eventually begin to photograph the master bedroom suite?
Yes, I did.
Let me take you through these. Am I flipping it too fast, or is it keeping up with my flipping?
It's keeping up with your flipping.
Now, beginning at 660, and we'll talk about this more later, did you also use measuring devices in images after you did photographs without the measuring devices?
Yes, I took overall photographs of what you're seeing here, and then
They're
after.
not seeing it yet.
Oh, there, I'm sorry. I apologize. Yes,
All right, so the answer is yes, you used some measuring devices after not using them.
correct.
Okay. Now, after documenting the scene, did you ultimately go to the sheriff's office later in that morning?
Yes, I did.
Did you take pictures of Mr. Ward?
Yes.
Do you see Mr. Ward in the courtroom here today?
Yes, I do.
May the record reflect she's identified the defendant. Did you take pictures of his shoes,
Yes,
his clothes,
correct.
his hands,
Yes,
his forearms,
yes,
the back of his clothes?
yes.
Then included in this roll of photographs, did you, after collecting evidence from the scene, bring it back to the sheriff's office for processing?
Yes, I did.
And did you photograph that process?
Yes,
Did you ultimately collect items from the medical examiner's office?
yes,
And then did you bring that back to Orange County Sheriff's Office and do any processing, examining, labeling, packaging?
yes, I did.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move A.N. as in Nancy for identification and evidence.
Any objections? No objection. This will be received without objection. States number 18.
Permission to publish.
Granted.
All right.
It's up.
So beginning with 237, we're going to go quickly through the not master bedroom photos.
Okay.
Just so the jury has an overview, is this the garage?
Yes.
All right, beginning with image 345, what are we looking at here? And can you give us some directionality, like where one might have come from in the house to have this view?
This is the entrance into the master bedroom. It's located on the west side of the master bedroom. If you go into the residence on the first floor, there was stairs on the west side. You would walk up to the second floor, and as you walked up to the second floor and went towards your left, the entrance to the master bedroom was there.
And if I could, with the court's permission, can I use the diagram of the house BB for demonstrative aid as well?
No objection. While he's bringing that up, can the jury clearly see those photographs? Do you need me to dim the lights? No, you good? All right.
All right, turning back to 345, using the diagram, can you help explain where we're looking?
Would you like me to put a point on it again?
Sure.
Can you see it?
All right, and is that how the lighting appeared to be in the house? Did you do anything to change the artificial lighting in this picture other than the flash?
No, I did not.
And can you
Yes.
clear our arrow? Remember?
Okay.
And then I think if you hit the arrow again, that'll close the menu. All right. And what are we looking at in 348?
It is an overall going into the master bedroom, kind of showing the floor area.
And 351?
This is an overall photograph of the closet in the master bedroom.
354?
Another overall of a closet room in the master bedroom.
All right. What are we looking at in 357?
This photograph is an overall photograph of the master bedroom, and it shows the victim lying on the ground.
360?
Another overall photograph of the master bedroom showing the bed and the west nightstand.
Now, at this point in the process, have you collected any evidence off of Mrs. Ward?
No, I have not collected any evidence.
And
off
why
of
not?
Mrs. Ward. At a crime scene, the body is not our jurisdiction. I don't have rights to touch or examine the body other than take photographs of the body.
Did you make any requests of anyone to be able to touch her body and collect evidence from her?
No, I did not.
Why not?
It is not my call to make a request like that.
.363.
This is another overall of the bedroom showing the other side of the bed, and that would be the east nightstand dresser.
And with this diagram, just to remind us all, is south kind of the up of this? So it's like the opposite of a normal picture where north is up?
Yes, for this diagram, it is opposite of what you would typically have. South is up.
And the headboard of the bed would be at the top of the round area of what's called the master bedroom.
That is correct.
.366.
Another overall photograph of the master bedroom showing just a sitting area in the room.
.369.
An additional overall of the master bedroom going into another area in the master bedroom.
.372.
An additional overall of the master bedroom.
We're going to skip a couple. This perspective here in .387.
So if you're looking at the picture now, to the right would be the entryway that I used to get into the master bedroom that you saw previously.
.393.
An additional overall photograph of the master bedroom.
.396, same thing.
Yes.
Same for .399
Yes.
and .408.
Yes.
.420, geographically, are we looking kind of west-northwest?
Geographically, I would be standing east, facing west. If you look to the top right of the photo, that was the entry-exit door I used to get into the master bedroom.
And in .423, is there something you're trying to document in the center of this photograph?
This was the area between the bed and the table for the television. There was a hair clip on the floor and a few suspected blood stains on the ground that I was documenting.
Now, these circular things that are on Mrs. Ward's right bicep and her left calf, are you familiar with those?
Yes, I am.
And what are you familiar with them being?
They are the medical leads that the fire department comes in and uses to try to determine if the victim has a pulse.
.429, another image in that rough direction.
That is correct.
.432.
Another image of the master bedroom showing what you would consider the west curved portion of the wall.
Now, did you suspect anything about that red stuff on the wall?
That stain appeared to be suspected blood stain.
Do you have a blood stain analyst at the sheriff's office or availability in another agency to call out to the scene?
No, we do not have an expert in blood stain at our office or anywhere near us.
Do you ultimately just document with pictures before without measuring devices and then subsequent with measuring devices?
Yes, that is correct.
Did you make any efforts to try and collect that portion of the wall?
Yes, I did try to cut out that portion of the wall.
And just tell us about that. How did you try to do it, and what success, if any, did you enjoy?
Typically, if we have any stain on the wall that we want to collect, we'll use a drywall saw to cut out the drywall after we photographed, taken any swabbings or anything we needed from the wall. When we tried to cut this one out, we realized it's not drywall, it's full concrete with, I believe, stucco on top. So it just started breaking at the wall. There was no way for us to collect it. So the photographs is all we have.
.435.
This is an overall photograph of the master bedroom. It's showing the west nightstand.
And did the clock seem to be roughly accurate, 3:28 in the morning? Would that be about when you were doing this?
Yes, it should be the correct time.
Is this the east nightstand?
Yes,
in
that is correct.
441. The west nightstand again in 447?
Yes,
Closer up in 450?
yes.
Where is this in 456?
This is a chair in the master bedroom. It is sitting between the victim's body on the floor, and then to your right, if you were looking at the picture, to your right is where the little TV stand was located.
All right, and in image 483, is this a picture of Mrs. Ward?
That is correct.
And is that a fair and accurate depiction of the blood pattern as you found her on her clothing
Yes, it is.
and her left shoe?
Yes.
Now, I know you mentioned it earlier, but did you do any collection of blood swabs on her to test whether that was blood or not at the scene?
No, I did not do any swabs on her.
Why not?
Again, I am not allowed to touch the body at a crime scene. I don't have jurisdiction over it.
486?
This is another photograph just showing the victim's feet and the floor and carpet around the area showing suspected blood stains.
489?
This is another picture of the west rounded portion of the wall showing the suspected blood stain from earlier.
501?
This is an overall photograph if I was standing behind Mrs. Ward as if I was coming in from the main door, showing the edge of the bed on the north side, the TV credenza, and that clip that we talked about earlier.
504?
This is a photograph of the ottoman from the chair that we just saw the photo of.
With the clothes on it and the pillow?
Yes, that is correct.
All right. 513?
This is an overall photograph showing the west side of the bed, the west nightstand, the victim's lower torso, and the floor around the victim.
525?
This is an overall photograph of the victim's hands and the floor around the victim.
Did she have blood on her hands?
Yes.
528?
This is a close-up view of the victim's left hand.
And did there appear to be small blood patterns on this hand?
There did appear to be suspected small blood stains on this hand.
And in 531, what are we talking about in that previous photograph of suspected small blood stains? Is that evident on her forefinger in this image?
Yes, it is.
And again in 534?
Correct.
537, is this her right hand?
Yes, that is a picture of her right hand.
Any suspected blood on the back of her right hand?
Yes.
540, another picture of the right hand?
Yes.
And is this plastic thing part of the medical intervention EKJ things?
Yes, it should be.
549?
This is an overall photograph showing the side of the victim if I was standing on the east side facing the west.
Lower body of Mrs. Ward in 555?
Yes.
Another one, same vicinity, 564?
Yes.
And did you have any suspicions about what you saw on the carpet and on the hardwood floor there?
I just noticed suspected blood stains on the floor there.
Did you ultimately collect any of the carpet after processing the scene?
Yes, I did collect some of the carpet.
And is this the west wall in 567?
Yes, this is the wall we tried to collect.
In 570, is that still reflective of what you suspected to be blood on the floor?
Yes, it is.
573, is there anything of note on this white bedspread, comforter, whatever you want to call it?
This is a photograph of the west side of the bed, and there are suspected blood stains on the comforter.
576?
Another photograph of the West nightstand and the contents on the nightstand.
Now, did you process the nightstand for fingerprints?
No, I did not.
Why not?
Both people involved in this investigation lived at the residence, so we would assume that both fingerprints could be on anything in the residence.
And by fingerprints, let's talk a little bit more about that. What is a latent fingerprint? Do you know?
A latent fingerprint is a fingerprint that you can't see with the visible eye. You need to use a chemical enhancement in order for it to pop up.
And what would be an example of that?
An example of a chemical?
Yeah.
Typically, we would process a non-porous area like this with black latent powder that would adhere to the fingerprints that could be on there. We would then use clear tape to lift that print and put it on a backing card so that the identification section can try to make an identification.
And is there any set duration or lifetime for a latent fingerprint on something?
There typically is not.
And so what sorts of things can terminate the lifetime of a latent fingerprint?
Weather, temperature, water, heat. Sometimes people won't leave fingerprints if they're not sweaty enough, don't have enough oils on their fingers, so they could touch the area and they don't actually leave a fingerprint. Cleaning products, if someone cleaned or dust, that would take fingerprints away.
Okay. And in speaking with Miss Wood, the Kelly with no E, the CSI, did she relay to you that she had put the gun on top of that computer there and where she had found it?
She did inform me that she had moved it. I don't recall where she actually found it from.
So we would go back to her testimony and her photographs?
Yes, that is correct.
Now, did you have any, did you suspect that Mrs. Ward had put the gun on top of the nightstand?
Mrs. Wood or Mrs.
Mrs. Ward.
Mrs. Ward. I don't have any knowledge of that.
Okay. After she was shot, do you have any expectations that she would have been able to move the firearm?
I would assume not. There was no visible suspected blood on the firearm.
So regardless of whether it was there or where Miss Wood documented it, you didn't suspect Mrs. Ward of having moved it after she was shot?
That is a good assumption, yes, correct.
Did you, you collected this firearm, is that right?
Yes, I did.
Did you process it for latent fingerprints?
No, I did not.
And why not?
I didn't process it for latent fingerprints because either Mr. Ward or Mrs. Ward's fingerprints could be on it since they both resided in the residence. I also decided to swab the firearm for DNA purposes, and I didn't want to lose any possible DNA by using fingerprint powder on it.
And tell us the process about how you would swab a firearm or anything else for testing for DNA purposes.
Typically, when swabbing a firearm, we're going to take 2 sterile swabs. I believe I discussed it yesterday how I was swabbing. The same technique. I'm going to put new gloves on, 2 sterile swabs, put distilled water on one of the swabs. I'm going to rub the area of the firearm swabbing vigorously. I'll put that into a box, seal it, initials, and then I'll start over again in a different area.
Okay. And did you have any information as to where this gun might have come from prior to its use?
No, I do not have any information on that.
Now let's talk about the holster. Did you process the holster for latent fingerprints?
No, I did not.
Why not?
The holster was made of a fabric material, which is not typically conducive for latent fingerprints. There was a small area that kind of clipped onto your belt if you were to wear it. It was a textured area, so that also was not conducive. And then in this situation, because both parties lived there, it could be assumed if it was conducive for latent prints that either one of their fingerprints could have been on it.
And again, a fingerprint doesn't have a date timestamp on it like an email. Is that kind of fair to say?
That is fair to say.
All right. Now, did you process this holster for DNA by like swabbing it with the saline solution as you described earlier?
No, I did not.
And why not?
Both parties could have their DNA on the holster since it is in the residence where they both live.
Now let's talk about your background and familiarity with DNA. Are you familiar with a term called touch DNA?
Yes.
What is touch DNA?
Touch DNA is if I were to touch something and some of my skin cells would slough off and land onto that item, and we would be swabbing that area to try to find small particles of DNA that were left behind.
And are there other ways for one's DNA to be on an item other than that person having directly touched that item?
Yes, it could come from their mouth, it could come from their nose, from other bodily fluids.
Can it be transferred by another person or another object?
Yes, touch DNA can be transferred from one person to another person.
And how long can touch DNA, or obviously any DNA, remain upon a surface?
I believe that would depend on the circumstances, just like a fingerprint, the heat, the weather, stuff like that.
And again, does DNA come with a date and time stamp as to when it was placed on an item?
No.
So would you agree that you have to look at other surrounding circumstances and facts and able to draw any inferences about date and time, because otherwise it just shows that there's DNA there,
That is correct.
just like if there's a fingerprint there?
Yes.
So in your opinion, if DNA is on an object, does that tell you who most recently used the object?
It would not tell you that. It would just tell you that at some point that person touched that object.
Or had their DNA transferred onto it?
That is correct, or had their DNA transferred onto it.
Or projected it with a cough or a sneeze during the flu season?
Yes, that is correct.
That ammo box there, did you process that for latents or DNA?
No, I did not.
Why not?
It belongs in the residence of the two people involved in the incident, and both of them are allowed to touch it at any time.
And what's your familiarity with firearms, if any?
I am a forensics firearms specialist. I've taken training courses as a firearms analyst, and on a daily basis, I test firearms, function test, and enter them into the database.
Can you use 410 gauge ammunition in a 357 Magnum?
No, you cannot.
Can you use any ammunition in a 357 Magnum other than 357 and 38?
No, you may not.
Image ending in 579. I believe we discussed these stains yesterday, right?
That is correct.
And by these stains, I'm referring to the purplish stains more in the center and towards the right of this image.
Yes.
And in the bottom left of this image, did you suspect that particular stain to be anything?
From this picture, it looks a little darker than the purple stain, so it probably was the suspected blood stain versus the purple stain.
And now that we are on to 582, does that contextually help you answer that question?
Yes, it was closer to the suspected blood stains.
And is that what we're beginning to see more of in the left of this image?
Yes, it is.
585, what is this?
This is a close-up photograph of the comforter that was located on the west side of the bed that we saw previously, showing the suspected blood stains.
588.
This is a photograph of the carpet below the bed. If you were looking directly below of where you just saw those original stains on the comforter, those are the suspected blood stains on the floor below.
591.
Same picture as before, it just shows some cords to the right of the stains.
594.
Another overall photograph of the floor showing the stains in that area.
597.
So overall photograph of the floor showing the stains and also showing the victim's, I believe to be right foot.
600.
An overall photograph of the victim's feet and the stains on the floor near.
I'm going to skip ahead a few. And for the benefit of the jury, the exhibits can go back with you, so you're not missing anything. All right. Turning to 660, what are we looking at here in addition to the scene as you found it?
This is an overall photograph of the floor in the master bedroom next to the large puddle of suspected blood. And I just added measuring marker stickers, so if ever anyone needed to analyze any of this, they had actual measurements and documentation.
And is it fair to say that Mrs. Ward is to the right of this image, head first, and then her feet further away to the right?
Yes, that is correct.
Another image of that same area with your measuring tape for future use?
Yes.
It's 663. 666, did you also put measuring tape around Mrs. Ward?
Yes, we did put measuring tape on the carpet around her hand.
Looking at 678, do you yourself have any expertise in blood pattern analysis?
I have the basic general knowledge. I've taken multiple workshops on how to examine blood stains, but not as an expert.
Again, in 693, you put measuring tape around Mrs. Ward?
Yes, that is correct.
Did you also put it along the wall vertically and horizontally as seen in 723?
Yes, I did.
And we talked about those suspected stains earlier between the bed and what is a TV stand. In 744, did you put the little white measuring tape next to those suspected stains?
Yes.
And is it your belief that sometimes you can figure out directionality if you have sufficient expertise?
Yes, that is correct.
And again, measuring tape all the way down the length of the carpet from Mrs. Ward's feet in 759, is that fair?
Yes.
And in 897, did you also put those little white sticky measuring tapes along some of the pattern along the wall?
Yes,
In case somebody can figure out directionality.
that is correct.
These last three images referring to 15, 18, and 21, that is 915, 918, and 921, are these patterns, obviously with the measuring tape, these are small patterns relatively compared to a lot of what we're seeing?
Yes, these are smaller blood stains. As you can see with the label, it's in centimeters, and these appear to be smaller than the other ones that were photographed and documented.
And this is the window area above the ledge with the big blood stain.
Yes.
And did some, like in 927, did some blood actually get on the horizontal flat part of that shelf?
Yes, that's what this picture depicts.
And in 966, is this the inside of Mrs. Ward's left shoe?
Yes.
All right. Image ending in 005. What are we looking at here?
This is an overall photograph of the revolver located on the west nightstand. It's showing the cylinder and what is inside the cylinder.
Now, looking at this image 005 a little closer, just looking at the 5 head stamps, well, let's start with, what's a head stamp?
A head stamp is the edge portion of the cartridge with the ammunition. It shows caliber, manufacturer, and it also has the primer on it that's going to cause the explosion for the projectile to get expelled out of the firearm.
Just looking at these 5 head stamps, can you tell me if one appears to have been fired as opposed to the others?
Yes.
And which one would that be? And you can use our markup technology. All right, tell us what's different about that one from the other 4.
There is a circular impression in the primer of that cartridge, which shows that the firing pin hit that primer to cause the explosion. So that one would be just the cartridge case, so it would be an expelled cartridge.
And what is primer, other than what I put under my walls before I paint?
A primer is what causes the explosion. It could be made out of nickel or brass. The firing pin hits it, and the metal heats up, causing the gunpowder that's inside to heat up and explode the projectile to come out.
And according to the head stamp, what caliber ammunition was this?
.357 Magnum.
Now, I don't know if you use the best words to describe it as far as like 1 to 10, low, medium, high, but can you describe this caliber of ammunition compared to other ammunition for handguns?
I don't think I would be able to explain the caliber unless it's just specifically a revolver caliber.
Okay. Image 008, what are we looking at here?
This is the cylinder after the cartridges were removed.
011?
This is showing what was inside the cylinder. You have the 4 live rounds still that show the projectile still intact, and then you have the 1 fired cartridge case.
And can you tell us anything about this ammunition with the 4 that still had the projectile attached to the casing?
This is considered hollow point ammunition, where the middle portion of the projectile is hollowed out, causing it to mushroom more when it enters.
What does mushroom mean?
It kind of looks like a flower. It mushrooms out, so it can cause more damage.
And in 029, were you there to document as Mrs. Ward was removed?
Yes, I took photographs as they were putting her into the body bag.
In 098, did you document the blood pattern after she had been removed
Yes, I did.
for future use by a blood analyst?
That is correct.
Again, in 101, what is this?
That is the overall photograph showing after the victim was removed, the stains that were on the floor.
Now, I don't remember the image number, but previously we discussed an image where her feet came down to some measuring tape, and then that measuring tape went towards the nightstand. Is that area just to the right of the end of the measuring tape? Is that where her foot had been?
On this photo, I believe that's where it had been. That might be the tape that was around her arms and head.
Did those last series of images, 110, 07, and 04, help you understand whether that was the foot or now we're looking towards the head?
Yes, that was the foot in the first image.
And then in 122, once she was removed, did you put any white directional tape down?
Yes, I put a sticky tape down on the carpet below where I saw some stains.
And 125, is this what I would call a mouse eye view of the picture?
Yes,
Same for 128?
that is correct.
And is that documenting anything on the wall or the baseboard?
Showing the blood stains on the wall.
All right, so for the measuring in 149, you start with the baseboard.
Yes,
So whatever height the baseboard is, did you approximate that or annotate that anywhere?
yes, I believe it's approximately 2.5 feet.
I mean, the baseboard, the white, see how the measuring tape is starting on top of the baseboard?
Oh, the measuring tape on the baseboard.
Yeah. Did you calculate approximately what the height of the baseboard was to add in to the height to the end of the windowsill there?
Could I refer to my report just to see?
Sure.
Thank you. I do not have that exact measurement. I just have approximation of the entire wall right there.
Okay. Let's get to the right image. Approximately how high was it up to that horizontal windowsill there?
Approximately 2.5 feet.
What are we looking at here in 257?
This is the overall photograph showing the comforter and the floor. The other CSI that was with me was taking the measuring tape so I could photograph the area.
And is that in inches?
Yes, it should be in inches.
And again in 260?
Another overall photograph showing measuring tape in with the bloodstains from the actual comforter.
266?
Overall photograph of the floor showing the measuring tape and the bloodstains on the floor.
And 269?
Another measuring tape showing kind of the height of the bed and showing that there is suspected blood stains on the portion of the bed, the lower portion of the bed.
Bed skirt?
Yes, bed skirt.
And is it fair to say, in looking a little closer at 269, that the bed was about 27 inches high before you added the height of the comforter and bedding stuff?
That is correct.
.278, another image of that on the bed skirt?
Yes.
And is there any on the white portion of the bedding as well?
Yes, there is some blood on the white portion of the bedding.
281, is this a bird's eye view looking down at that bag in front of the stain on the wall?
Yes.
299, without the bag there?
Yes.
And now that you have the measuring tape there, it's about 33 inches and change from the ground up to that horizontal part of the windowsill?
Yes, that is correct.
And would it be fair to say about 30 inches to the off the ground for the top of the major portion of the big blood stain?
Yes, I believe I documented approximately 2.5 feet for that.
I guess 30 is about 2.5. Okay. Now, what are we looking at here? Is this a different room in 305?
Yes, this is an office on the first floor. This is one of the cabinets and the desk in the office.
And did you end up collecting, well, what's in this?
In this cabinet, there was ammunition, additional firearms, firearm cleaning tools, boxes for firearms, and other firearm-related evidence.
And was that on the first floor or the second floor?
That was on the first floor.
Lost it. We'll come back to that. Did you find any .357 ammunition anywhere in the house except for in the .357 Magnum?
Can I please refer to my report just to confirm?
Sure.
No, not ammunition.
Okay. And you said you found 2 other firearms down there in that office?
Yes, 2 other firearms.
Okay. All right. Now, starting with 320, what are we looking at here?
This is an overall photograph of Mr. Ward.
323, lower half of Mr. Ward?
Yes.
And 326, is there anything of note in this image?
Yes, the blood stains on the top of his shoes.
And the area that we testified about yesterday, M, the swabs that you took of the ankle that turned out to be purple or something, can you show us, is that evident in this image or is it not?
I don't see it in this image.
Do you recall where on his ankle you did that?
I have it in my report, and it's on the swabs if you'd like me to give you what ankle.
Yeah, would you refresh your memory with the report if you can,
Yes.
and then let us know if it did?
His right ankle?
And inside, outside, front, back, or is that not notated?
It just states his right ankle.
329, is it in this image?
Yes, I can see it in this image now.
All right. Can you indicate where?
Right above his shoe, I'll mark it.
Okay.
To the left, to the right of the marking.
.332, another image of his shoe.
Yes.
What are we looking at in 338?
An overall photograph of his hands.
Did you see any indication of any injuries on his hands?
No, I did not.
And by any injuries, I mean scrapes, abrasions, bruises, cuts. Any injuries?
No, not that I recall.
341?
That is an overall photograph of his palms.
Any injuries to his palms?
No.
Did you see any visual indication of blood anywhere on his hands?
No.
344?
Another photograph of his hands.
And did you see any injuries on his forearms?
There was a marking on his left forearm.
And did you see any blood?
No.
What are we looking at in image 353?
The backside of Mr. Ward showing his shirt.
Same for 356?
Yes.
359?
Yes.
All right, going back to those images. Did you do any chemical testing to see what that stain might be?
No, I did not.
Why not?
It appeared to be suspected wine, same color as what I saw at the residence, and there is no testing that I know of for wine.
Did you submit it to the lab for testing for wine?
No, I did not.
Are you aware of any testing that the Florida Department of Law Enforcement might do to tell you if something is wine?
I am not aware of any testing.
What are we looking at in image 368?
This is a photograph of the box of the 357 revolver, the original box that it came in. This envelope shows a test fire. When the firearm is manufactured, the manufacturing company will do one test fire to confirm that the firearm functions properly. And typically they'll put a test fire into the box when you purchase it, telling you all that information.
All right, 371. What are we looking at?
This is an overall photograph of the firearm back at my lab.
All right, and you already discussed that you made the decision to swab for DNA rather than test for latents, and you explained why.
Yeah, that is correct.
Now, before making those decisions, did you visually inspect it for any suspected blood?
Yes.
Did you see any suspected blood on the firearm?
No, I did not.
Did you look for suspected blood down the barrel of the firearm?
Yes, I did.
Is it possible to get blood or blowback from the person on the wrong end of a firearm discharge inside the barrel of a firearm?
Yes, depending on the distance, you would expect to get blowback going back into the barrel or on this side that you're seeing of the firearm.
And did you, obviously, we're looking at this dimension, the front of the firearm with the cylinder dropped down. Did you see any suspected blood anywhere looking at it in this dimension?
No, I did not.
Did you document the ammunition in the firearm?
Yes, I took a photograph at the lab of the ammunition.
And you had taken that out at the scene?
Yes.
413, where did you collect this from again?
I collected this from the patio area on the floor near the grill.
416?
These are photographs of the 4 bottles I collected in the kitchen.
Now, yesterday you mentioned that one might have had something in it and that you documented how much. Is that where we're looking at here in the center?
Yes, the red marking is, it was filled to that level, so I put a marking there before I emptied it out.
Then the other 3 bottles, those were the ones in the trash?
Yes.
And did you process Mr. Ward's shoes?
Yes, I took photographs of Mr. Ward's shoes and swabbed for suspected blood.
Back towards the heel, is this the right or the left shoe in image 428?
That should be the right shoe.
Well, tell us how did you go about swabbing the shoe for suspected blood?
Can I refer to my report to see how many swabs I took?
Sure.
Thank you. In this investigation, I took swabs from each shoe separately from the top portion of the shoe.
Did you take any swabs from the back area here?
No, I did not.
Visual inspection, did they appear similar to the stains on the front of the shoe?
Yes, they did.
Did you see any suspected blood on the left shoe?
Yes,
Did you swab that?
I did.
Did you send it to the lab?
I believe I sent it to the lab.
You see any suspected blood on the bottom of the right shoe in 461?
Yes,
And is that marked with the white sticky tape?
that is correct.
Same thing in 464?
Yes,
And then again, we discussed the shirt. Did you process the shirt?
I took overall photographs of the shirt and documented that there was a stain on the rear portion of the shirt.
Now, in images 470 and 473, did you suspect this stain to be anything?
This stain is suspected to be suspected blood.
Did you use your saline swabs to collect a sample of it and send it to the lab?
Can I confirm?
Yes.
I did not.
And in 476, did you see any suspected stains?
Yes, in the collar.
And did you collect that?
I did collect that.
All right. Now, going back to 473 and 470, why not?
Why did I not collect it? At the time, I did not collect it.
And again, in 488, with the sticky tape on it, wasn't collected?
No, it was not collected. After looking at this photo, it is apparent to me that the color was not a red suspected blood color, but more of the purple wine color.
And what's on the reverse side of this shirt if you flip it over right there?
A large purple stain.
As opposed to this stain in 494?
Yes, it was in the back of the collar, and it appeared to be more of a reddish color.
Now, is this the reverse side of the shirt that we were just discussing with that stain in 488?
Yes, it is.
And based on your visual estimation and your opinion, that stain we were just talking about in 488, not the collar, but on the side, it resembled this?
Yes, after looking at the second close-up picture, it did resemble the purple stain.
Now, with his shorts, did you find any suspected stains on them?
Yes, I did find suspected stains on his shorts.
And did you use white sticky tape near those suspected stains?
Yes, I did.
And did you ultimately swab those stains?
Yes, I did.
How many different swabs did you take for these, looks like 6 sticky tapes?
I did one set of swabs for this area.
And the measuring tape here is in the metric system.
Yes.
So each of these stains would be some sort of a fraction of a centimeter,
That is correct.
approximately 1 millimeter.
Yes, you could say that.
Approximately how many of those individual stains? Did you run up a tally or no?
No, I just marked the 6 areas with this tape.
Okay. And so each of those 6 areas is documented, however many there by each sticky tape?
That is correct.
Now, in these areas, for instance, the top center of this image in 542, is there also that purple stain?
Are you talking about directly center in the top?
Yeah, directly center. I don't know if you can see my arrow, but
Yes, that appears to be a purple color stain.
how about in the top right corner?
Yes, it appears to be a purple stain.
And so if anybody wanted to contrast the two different stains, this would be an image to do so? Since
That is correct.
How about in 545?
To the left, next to the white label, there's the red blood stains, and to the right is the purple stain as well.
And whether or not that purple stain bled through from the back to the front, one could go back and look at the photographs of Mr. Ward at the sheriff's office to determine that?
Yes.
And what are we looking at in 554?
This is the rear portion of the pants showing a large purple stain at the top portion of the pants.
Was there any suspected blood anywhere on the back of his shorts?
No, there was not.
Was there any suspected blood on the left side of the front of his shorts?
No.
What are we looking at here in 557?
This is me taking a photograph of the revolver, trying to show a photograph of the inside barrel portion to see if you see any blood stains, any tissue, or any dirt or anything like that in it.
Did you visually observe any of those things?
I did not.
Despite not visually observing any of those things, did you still go ahead and swab it and send it to the lab?
Yes, I did.
What is this metal thing that looks like a screw coming out of the side of the gun in this image?
That would be a bore light that shines a light down the barrel so you can kind of have a better image of the barrel.
So the light source is coming from the back to the foreground?
Yes.
Did you turn the mood lighting down in this one?
I did.
Is this the case that 357 came in?
Yes.
And that's 578, and 581, and 584, 587. And then you also mentioned there was cleaning supplies for the guns. Is this what is 614
Yes.
and 617?
Yes.
And you said you ultimately collected evidence from the medical examiner's office?
I did.
And is that what we're looking at in 626?
Yes, it is.
And in 629?
Yes.
632?
Yes.
635?
Yes.
638?
Yes.
641?
Yes.
644?
Yes.
647?
Yes.
And what are we looking at in 647?
This was in a vial collected from the medical examiner's office, and it's the projectile found in the victim.
In 650, is that what you firearms people call jacketing?
Yes, it's the jacket.
Can you just briefly explain, it's lunchtime, briefly explain the difference between the actual projectile or the core and the jacketing?
Yes, some ammunition, specifically hollow point ammunition, you'll have a lead bullet, and then they'll put a copper-style thin metal jacketing on top of it that sometimes once the projectile shoots out, the jacketing will actually fall off the lead and it will get removed separately.
And then the last image was 659, just the jewelry that was collected?
Yes.
All right. So just one more question before I think everybody will agree with me that it should be lunchtime. Did you ask for the fingernail clippings from Mrs. Ward that you collected from the medical examiner's office? Did you ask for them to be sent to the FDLE for DNA testing?
No, I did not.
Why not?
There didn't appear to be any altercation where there was any scratching or anything. Also, if Mr. Ward or anyone else's DNA was under there, because they lived together, her own DNA can be under there, and his could also be under there.
And again, is there any way to tell what date and time his DNA could have gotten under there if it was there?
No.
Your Honor, at this time, I would suggest that I'm at a good breaking point, if the court agrees.
It is 12:10, so we're going to take a lunch recess at this time. Same thing as yesterday. Let's start back at 1:30, so the deputies will meet you down in the jury room around 1:15-ish. All right, I'll see you then.